Welcome to Bourbon and Beats from Eric's Juke Joint. June is Pride Month, which gives us an excellent opportunity to reflect on the contributions of LGBTQIA+ artists throughout history. There are so many we could choose from. Some of my personal favorites that come to mind would be Sir Elton John, Freddie Mercury, or George Michael. But the artists that had the biggest impact on my personal musical tastes early in life were none other than Boy George and Culture Club. And in thinking about pairing them with a bourbon, what better bourbon than the chameleon of the bourbon world? So today's episode is Culture Club's Color by Numbers and Four Roses Single Barrel. Culture Club's Color by Numbers was the first album that I ever purchased with my own money. I'd spent the week cutting grass in the neighborhood, and when I had enough saved up, and enough was probably $7, $8 in those days, my mom took me to the local 5 and dime called TG&Y, probably doesn't exist anywhere anymore. But I picked up the album, brought it home, put it on my parents' turntable, and began to commit every sound and every lyric to memory. And those memories still last today. I'd been introduced to the band the same way that a lot of us were in the 80s, by MTV.
Step per man, 1 giant leap for mankind.
MTV changed the game for music fans here in America in probably many ways, but a couple of ways in particular for my money. Number one, they exposed us to bands that we wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise, especially those of us that lived in the rural southeastern United States. We saw a lot of English bands in particular that were not played on the radio until after they were on heavy rotation on MTV. And people began to request those songs from the DJs, and then they became popular on radio too. But I don't think we would have ever been exposed to a lot of that music without MTV. So thank God for MTV. But the second thing that happened as a result of MTV was that, rightly or wrongly, it was starting to become almost as much about what we could see as it was what we could hear. And bands like Culture Club gave us a lot in both of those areas.
I know you miss me. I know you miss me. I know you...
Let's talk about the ears first. At their core, I don't necessarily like categories all the time for music, but if you were going to put them in a category, at their core, they're probably what we would have called new wave music at that period of time, what the Brits called the New Romantic movement, a movement spearheaded by bands like Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet. But what Culture Club had that was a little bit different about their sound was the influences, first of all, of reggae, heavy reggae beats and sounds in their music. Also, strong elements of soul music, especially in the way Boy George sang and the way Helen Terry, a longtime backup singer that worked with the band, the way she sang also added a lot of soul to their music. There were even some country elements on a few songs. We'll talk about one of those in a minute. But in addition to the sound, it was sure a feast for the eyes also, particularly Boy George. The costumes, the makeup, the hair, the jewelry, the way he danced. We had never seen anything like that before, especially again in the Southeast. My dad was a Baptist minister, and so I'm sure my parents' eyebrows went up quite a bit when they realized that their 10-year-old son's favorite band was fronted by a drag queen. But to their credit, they didn't try to talk me out of it or to explain to me exactly what was going on there, try to talk me out of it. Might have had something to do with the fact that my dad's favorite artist was Elton John, so I probably got a little patience and grace thanks to that fact. But that acceptance did not carry over to school. Kids often discuss their favorite movies, their favorite songs, their favorite bands. And when I told my classmates that Culture Club was my favorite band, I got teased a lot, got called a lot of names, a lot of terrible slurs, and it hurt my feelings quite a bit. And it made me feel quite a bit different from the rest of my classmates. But you know, looking back, that's nothing compared to what so many other people were going through during that period of time. In fact, I had two aunts, Teresa and Renee, that were probably the two biggest influences on me and my musical taste early in life, other than MTV, that is. They both had extensive vinyl collections. They both had good hi-fi equipment, especially Teresa. She always had some really cool stereo equipment. And their musical taste ran the gamut, from Pat Benatar to Kiss to Nazareth to Cyndi Lauper to the Motels. Some of those bands will probably show up on future episodes of this show, but they had a huge influence on me. They would let me listen to their albums on their equipment. They would let me borrow their albums and take them home, which showed a lot of faith. They would make me mixtapes. Renee even took me to my first concert ever, which was the Power Station. Probably talk about them at some point as well. But they were a huge influence on my life, and what I didn't realize at that point was that they were hiding a big part of who they were just so they could get through the day and survive. So many other people in the 80s were doing the same thing, and here we are in the year 2026, and we're not too much further along, are we? A lot of people still persecuted, mistreated, hurt, teased, any number of things simply because of their sexuality. You know, Boy George had a lot of those same issues too, and on the surface, he always appeared joyful, flamboyant, but it was obvious later in the 80s that there was a lot of pain in the background that we weren't aware of. And there was heroin addiction as a result of that. There were legal problems. There was the band breaking up. There was heartbreak. Some people might know that he had been in a secret relationship with John Moss, the drummer. And a lot of the sad lyrics that you hear in Culture Club songs are about that relationship. Time, in particular, was written about him. Do You Really Want to Hurt Me was written about him. So a lot of the lyrics were about that relationship with John. So there was a lot of pain that led to a lot of the problems that Boy George had in the late 80s. But thank goodness he finally got it all together, got past a lot of that, and came back strong, started touring again eventually with the band. I got to see them, all four original members, in Nashville 10, 12 years ago, and the 10-year-old inside of me was geeking out. And there was definitely a lot to hear and definitely a lot to see. I've never seen so many costume changes in a show in all my life. It was a lot of fun. The biggest track from this album was probably Karma Chameleon, a song that had a lot of airplay on the country charts as well as the pop charts. It started a lot of conversation, some of it negative, some of it positive, and it started us down the path. We still have a long ways to go on that path of acceptance and understanding But I think Boy George deserves some credit for helping to start those conversations. He opened our minds, and he did it with a hell of a lot of pizzazz. Since he's one of the spiciest artists in my collection, I thought it only appropriate to pair this album with one of the spiciest bourbons in my collection. So we're going to head over to the bar and talk a little bit about Four Roses Single Barrel Bourbon. I called Four Roses the chameleon of the bourbon world because they do something that most other distilleries don't do. They can change colors rather frequently, or in this case, mash bills and flavors. Four Roses has two different distinct mash bills. I call one of them the high rye mash bill, and I call the other one the really high rye mash bill. They're both pretty spicy, but they also use 5 different yeast strains. And what that does is give them 10 different combinations that they can come up with and produce and then play with in the mixing process. So you got 10 different kinds of barrels that go into the barrel house, and then you can mix and match those. Maybe this one gets this barrel and becomes this product. And this other product is maybe a single barrel product, and so it only gets one of these mash bill and yeast combinations. But whatever, it gives them a lot of flexibility to do a lot of different things. And I understand now there's even more than 2 mash bills in play. But for the main bulk of their products on the market, you've got 10 different total formula combinations that they put together. This one in particular is a single barrel product, which I've explained what that is before. So it is just the one mash bill, and it is the higher of the 2 mash bills. It's 60% corn, 35% rye, which comes in about as high as anything on my shelf, and 5% malted barley. It also comes in at right at 100 proof, which, as I've said before, is my personal sweet spot. The distillery is also pretty unique and kind of goes along with the chameleon theme. It was designed to look like a Spanish mission, and it is a really beautiful set of buildings to see. It's a great tour to go on, and they will explain more in detail all the mash bill and formula combinations that they're able to do, which ones go in each product, and then you'll get to also taste some at the end to kind of compare and contrast the different products that they produce. One interesting thing in the news about this distillery that's happened very recently is that they were just purchased from the Kirin Brewing Company, a Japanese company, by the Ernest and Julio Gallo Winery for a whopping $775 million. So obviously they're doing okay in the bourbon world and making a few bucks here. It's been a couple of months since I've actually pulled this one off the shelf, so I'm going to refresh my memory and then share with you what I notice. So right away, there's a cinnamon hint in the aroma. Yeah, that's what I get both times, just heavy cinnamon. Strong, spicy flavor. You can tell right off the bat it's rye heavy. I really enjoy this one after a really savory or spicy meal, when maybe your palate's so revved up you wouldn't notice, say, a wheated bourbon or a really light rye bourbon. So this one, you will definitely still notice the flavor. It'll cut through whatever you already have on your palate. So I drink this one mostly after dinner as opposed to happy hour before dinner. So it's great for that. But it's really great for any occasion if you like a high rye bourbon. If you're new to the bourbon world, I wouldn't recommend starting with one this spicy. Start with a wheated bourbon or something in the 10 to 13 range rye if it's a rye bourbon. And you'll probably have a better experience and then work up to something with higher rye like this. Well, once again, happy Pride Month to you. I hope that each of you finds the love that you deserve and that you also find the freedom to be able to express it publicly. Happy Pride.